this is, that negative thought you've been having, and I just can't let you try and change yourself without a fight. So, go ahead and just turn the show off, okay? And, yeah, everything's still fine.
This is Blindsight with your host, Bill Lundgren, an AINC original podcast.
You serious?
We're not holding back truth. We're here to help you heal and become the best you possible. Here's the chair. Here's the pillow. Here's Bill.
Hi there. Welcome to Blindsight. This is a product of Audio Information Network of Colorado, and it's a podcast designed to talk about mental health and mental wellness. And I'm your host, Bill Lundgren, and I'm really delighted to have as our guest today Lynda McCullough, who is a blindness coach. And I'm real excited to have her on board because I think this is an important thing for people to be aware of. So, Lynda, welcome to Blindsight.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
What I wanted to start off with is, as I often do, is to ask my guest to tell me a little bit about how they got to where they are in terms of their particular title, shall we say, in your case, a blindness coach. How did you get there? What made you decide to take that direction?
Well, I had been a health writer and yoga teacher, but I had also been to the eye doctor. I was getting a blurriness in especially one eye, and I went into the eye doctor and was told I had a degenerative disease and was going to lose my sight. And that terrified me. Turns out it was keratoconus, and it's been fairly stable. But after having been a health writer for a while, I ended up working for a nonprofit serving people with vision loss. And I worked for 6 years, I believe, at Connections for Independent Living, and I often partnered with Insight Skills Center. And then I later ended up working as outreach coordinator for Insight. So I learned a lot about the impacts of vision loss on people's lives. And I learned a lot about the tools that helped and the kinds of support people needed and the amazing resources available. And I always had a bit of an understanding of what it was like to get a diagnosis.
Sure.
That was scary. So, during the pandemic, Insight's director, Denny Moyer, and I, and Michael Stone, who's another adapting to vision loss coach, decided to put together more of an actual program and, find a way to help people one-on-one who wanted, they would probably be getting Insight's wonderful services, but they would also want to talk to someone about the emotional impacts and other impacts on their life and how in their particular lives they were adapting and what might help. So we created this Adapting to Vision Loss coaching program. And I do have coach training, and I do have a mental health background, though I'm not a licensed therapist.
But if I'm going to a coach, and let's say Insight tells me to see you, what kinds of things that I would have to share with you, and tell me a little bit about what happens when they get. If I got your name, what would happen next? Yeah,
people might be talking with our admin folks or an occupational therapist, and those staff people might suggest that someone talk with me or with Michael, and then if they are inclined, I would talk with them on the phone, and kind of an informal assessment. We found it worked better just to talk. And so I check in on the various areas of someone's life, how they're faring with the how they're feeling about the diagnosis or change in vision, and then what kinds of social support they have, what kind of tools they've had that have been helpful. So what is helping and what they're struggling with. If they've already seen Insight's eye doctor and occupational therapist, that's usually a big help because they already start to understand the amazing help they can get. But still, there's going to be, the emotional impact and many areas of life affected that they'll want to talk through and figure out their own individual approach to, how am I going to adapt to this? I'm feeling this way about it. There's a number of issues for each individual, impacted in different ways, of course.
And do you do an assessment of the family support and where the family is? Because some family members are more denial than the person who's got the issue.
Yeah. And their family members are invited to come, talk.
Oh, they are? Okay.
Phone calls with us. Insight's occupational therapists are actually really good at addressing those types of things with the families too. And sometimes they'll talk with them more than I will on that kind of thing because the family members will go to the assessments as well, and they'll get sort of an education on what their loved one's experiencing and how it impacts them and the things that can help and how they can still be independent.
Right.
So that kind of education for the family member is important, and sometimes I do it, but I think the bulk of it comes from the occupational therapists.
So, but your role is to give emotional support or help support the individual.
Yeah, to really meet them where they are in terms of the emotions that are impacting them like strongly at that particular time of diagnosis or a new loss. And, I check in with people though, like if someone's has severe depression or struggling with multiple life issues or something from the past, I do refer to psychotherapists, and we do have a very wonderful person to refer to who has a vision impairment herself.
Oh, good.
Psychotherapist. Yeah. So I can usually tell, and the person and I can tell together, when they really might prefer a psychotherapist or maybe me and the psychotherapist. But often, people need to know, yes, there are the other people going through this. Yes, of course you feel scared or angry, or you feel these emotions, of course. Just to be heard, I try to be very present with people and listen deeply because, it's really hard to learn to adapt and learn some of these new skills while you're also going through the emotional roller coaster. So we spend time really sitting with that and knowing it's okay to feel that way and knowing others have been through it and connecting people with the support group that Insight sponsors and Penn has led. And so it can be really, really helpful just to know they're not completely alone in what they're going through.
Absolutely. So that you kind of have resources, and if they raise something, such and such, and you can tell them to talk to the occupational therapist or make a specific recommendation. Why don't you check on life, a support group or something like that? And that's in the purview.
Yeah. I love that. Since I've worked in this field for 13 years, I really know the resources. Yeah. There's times when I have to refer someone to like the area agencies on aging or to Center for People with Disabilities in the Boulder area or Connections for Independent Living in the Weld County area, or Disabled Resource Service. Because they have a number of other resources and caseworkers, independent living specialists that can help with a number of things, Department of Human Services. As well as just, knowing that somebody might be, or they might bring it up that they're ready for orientation and mobility training or more intensive computer help.
Mm-hmm.
Really able to hear what might be most helpful, or, somebody has learned a few things, and then I can hear that they're ready for the next, tool or assistive technology that they have been exposed to but hadn't been able to assimilate, the information yet. So we can slowly start to master various life areas, or to learn about and to use new tools over time.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think a lot of people get very uptight if somebody mentions a therapist, but a coach is somehow would lower the anxiety threshold. They won't feel like they're a medical problem, and this is an experience problem. Getting used to the idea of a change, and would lower their anxiety to talk to you rather than the therapist, unless it really becomes very clear that they have to. It's not working on blindness so much as the anxiety or the depression.
Yeah, that's a really well said point, because sometimes I think of myself as a navigator.
There we go. I like that word. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, navigating your way through this new life experience, through a big transition, through a loss.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no reason we can't explore the emotions. I'm really big on, like, it's okay, we can sit with this, because if we push the emotion away, it'll keep, harassing us,
right,
so to speak.
Right.
Whereas if you acknowledge it and let it be part of what you're going through, at least in little bits and pieces, let that in for a little bit here and there when you feel more capable of dealing with it. And I can be somebody's partner in sitting with it and letting ourselves acknowledge that it's there. It just is an important part of the process. And, I have had people say that once they are able to do that and accept what's happening in their lives, they're more able to start mastering some of the new tools and new behaviors that they want to address.
I imagine you've observed it somewhat, not every time, but a lot of times, men don't like to talk about emotion. And women are given more permission from society to talk about emotion. Both of them need some coaching in just admitting, if you will. I know when I got the diagnosis, my thinking was action-oriented rather than how I felt. And I created and I didn't have a coach. I had to, doctor told me of the diagnosis, and I immediately went into an action mode. And action really was, I needed a kick in the pants to change my career, and this was it. Which then meant I could just avoid all the emotional part of it. And then later, when I could no longer deny it, I could fake it for a while, and did. But when I had to get, I went to Voc Rehab, and they gave me a white cane, and they maybe 2 or 3 trips out with a white cane, and that was it. And, I had to deal with it in a lot of other different ways. And certainly, I think what you're suggesting is extremely important. Have people just acknowledge that they're not some cuckoo having these emotions, that everybody has this kind of upset. But if you're not used to it, you've got a job to do to get people to even acknowledge what they're feeling.
Yeah. Yeah, it is mostly women that decide to take advantage of the coaching. It is free for people 55 and up in Colorado, and so.
But it's the women that take it rather than the men. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it does, and sometimes people will just not want to be talking about the emotions. It might take them a few months,
right?
And then they come back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like you're saying too, how they might be going into survival mode and figuring some certain life things out, and then like we all process it. Sometimes just takes us time to be prepared to sit and explore those emotions a little bit.
Or they just shut down.
But
or they shut down and maybe withdraw.
Other people don't want to hear that they're upset. You mean?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the issue, and because we're not a society where men and women are allowed to talk freely about emotions, it's almost scary for people. So that's your job, is to help people to create an environment so that people can talk about what they're feeling about this diagnosis.
People feel like they should buck up,
right.
Get on with it, You can have your 5 minutes of grieving,
right,
or saying you're scared. That's it. Get on with it. That's what our society says. But I'm a strong believer in, like, I think our emotions guide us. If we can feel them, yes, we've had a big loss, and I have to acknowledge that, and to some extent accept it as much as I can, and then it kind of guides us. I've lost this, but I can also feel my emotion, and I can feel what's next, what's most important to me right now in my life. And that's a way to move forward. But
it's also, once we get in touch with our emotion, then we're free to move forward. It's when we lock it up, we don't allow those emotions out, then we can get very paralyzed. And so you're giving the keys to unlocking some of that. Now where are the support groups? I know that Audio Information Network handles a virtual support group on Wednesdays. I think Wednesdays at 1:00. There are others around, I would imagine.
Yeah, and a lot of them got interrupted with the closure around the pandemic. And Insights actually does that Wednesday support group. It's now monthly, which is wonderful. And there's a new facilitator along with Penn Street.
I'm sorry, it's once a month. The one that Insight does is once a month on Wednesday.
It's every week now.
Every week now. Yeah, I'm sorry. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you're right. Like the Center for People with Disabilities has had a number of support groups, like in some retirement centers, at the center itself, and in other community places. And that some of those things took a long hiatus during the pandemic shutdown. So they've some of them have gone online, and you'd have to check with them to see where they stand. But there are other support groups around. Some, retirement centers or independent living centers or assisted living centers have their own too.
Mm-hmm. So it doesn't matter where people live; they can probably find something fairly close if they just ask around, or maybe call Insight and find out where there might be something near their home.
Yeah, I'm not sure if Insight would say this. The Insight one is now virtual, so anyone can access it.
Right. And that makes it very convenient. And that's certainly the first place to start.
Yeah. And, another thing, this is making me think of another thing that I often tell people about that also makes them feel less alone and is encouraging is, the podcast through, of course, Audio Information Network. And then, even Hadley's website has webinars, and Insight's website has some things on like self-advocacy and, emotional adjustment. And so those types of resources it's really nice. People can listen to them on their own time and gain a lot from hearing, this person's been through this and they're really thriving.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And, that, as you know, doing your podcast as you do, but that's just been tremendously helpful to a lot of people I've spoken with.
Well, what kinds of things do you to run up against? What kinds of things that people have to be watchful of in terms of they're trying to navigate this new information? There are not a lot of people who really understand blindness.
Yeah. Well, we've talked about kind of, the grief and getting depressed, and some people will feel isolated and reluctant to go out. So we can handle that a little at a time. But I've also been struck by it. The people feel like they've lost their identity, and maybe that means their role more specifically. Like, oh, I was the person who always picked up my grandkids, or I always did this in my community, or I had this, career where a very demanding career. So it feels like they're losing their identity. And yet they're still their same great self. But their role has changed dramatically. And so people don't know who they are to some extent, or what they want to do with their time. So they just have always thought of themselves as this person that did X or Y,
Right.
I took care of this for other people, and now I'm the one that needs help. And
right.
That
was my instant reaction when I got the diagnosis. I was working in doing sales promotion writing, and I said, I can't do this now. Unfortunately, I was primed to, I wasn't that happy with it. But I had to reassess, okay, what do I do now? How do I justify my existence? Because, this was everything I'd done up to that point. And, I switched careers, but I became an administrator, which was, again, didn't work for me, but that's fine. I tried it out and didn't. And then that's how I became a therapist. But then that was the scary thing because, what will people think? That magic word, what will people think? A blind therapist, or, can I manage even getting from point A to point B? And that's the kind of thing that would have been nice to have been able to talk to you about, kind of, rather than, just with a lick and a prayer, make it from point A to point B. Because, as you say, total change in what goes on. And that's what people need support on, though they don't know how to ask for it.
Right. Yeah. So you took some big steps toward new roles, and were kind of processing that by yourself. Yeah,
exactly. And, I had some people around me, but they didn't know because they weren't, how many people see blind people, really. And, time and time again, and even this, when I was at a class reunion, people said, you're the first blind person that I've known. And I think, what? Oh, wow. What?
I was going to say, one of the other subjects that I talk with people a lot about, they'll bring up that, like, perceptions of other people, or like how to advocate for themselves in a store, or, in a social situation, or something they've always done, or their spouse has always done,
right?
Their partner, that they have to go along to as well, maybe formal or informal situations. Like, how do you, do I want to tell people that I can't see their face clearly anymore, or do I not? Or how do I negotiate the food table? Like, how do I do all these things? And I'm still reluctant to even let people know. So, like, advocating for oneself, asking for help when needed, clarifying for others. Some people are tired from educating, as I know you would know, like educating others constantly, who don't understand what it's like to have lost vision.
So what do you recommend? What do you tell people in that kind of situation?
Yeah. Again, it's kind of important just to express it and say, this is what's really a challenge out in the world. And then to, get comfortable enough in oneself and with the situation to be able to clearly communicate, I have low vision and I can't see this. Would you please read this particular thing? Or, ask specifically for what's needed, to develop sort of that acceptance and assertiveness to do that. And sometimes it's talking to a family member, like, I do want help with this, but not with this, So I think just when someone talks with me, they get more comfortable with where they're coming from and what they can clarify what they need in the situation and what they want, and then, that acceptance to tell people what their situation, where they're coming from. So it's clarifying, it's being prepared to assert oneself, it's accepting and becoming more bold out in public. And again, I think it helps to hear from others in a support group, about that.
Right, because
those encounters.
What frequently happens is that someone may take over rather than communicate with the person who has blindness as to, asking what they need. People do ask me, I'm on the street, I'm standing there trying to decide which way I want to go. And somebody comes along and says, do you need help? And my usual response is, oh, I'm beyond help. And the reason I do that, one is because a little bit of humor breaks some of the barrier between another person. But this thing is, what people will do instead of asking, will just grab you by the arm. And what do? You don't want to take a white cane and beat some little old lady over her head because she thought she knew what you needed and was taking you across the street when you didn't. What do you do?
Yeah.
As you say, are these the kinds of things that come up that you have to kind of help people to address? Because these are very basic. People being very nice, but they don't ask. And how do you say to people as a coach, show people, how do you handle this? And also, I think in terms of how can we get people to see themselves as not really having changed as much as they perceive themselves as having changed. They're still the same person. It just happens they have one less faculty, so to speak, but that doesn't make them any less than anybody else. But that's the mindset that somebody may fall into. And the question, for you is, how do you get people to realize that?
I think that's really important. Yeah, and it's self-compassion at first. That sometimes we beat ourselves up when we have a body issue, or a health issue that, or something that changes our ability, and then and it's also hard to accept that this is happening to us. So again, I do think it's processing and acknowledging the emotions and relating to people from all your great qualities and knowing that you have support and remembering that people care for you and, accepting yourself and where you're at, as I've said, and that it's okay to ask for what you need and to explain your situation or to inform people of your situation. So it's, multiple discussions on those things and remembering one's self-worth,
right,
and the right to be out in society and doing what everybody else does. Then people have more voice to be assertive. Not that this is easy and simple, but it's a process we keep exploring, and people find so much resilience. This hasn't doesn't have to do with me, but they find resilience inside. People are strong and resilient, and they want to go about their lives. And so, kind of coaxing that out, and supporting people as they do it, and some people really surprise me. They're way ahead of me. Like I want to go do this, so I'm going to figure it out,
So they'll tell you that, and then you encourage them to follow through on what their plan is.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And, their family member and, everybody's getting used to this new person, new behaviors. And over time, it just becomes more easy. They just got to break through it first. And then there's more, the resiliency and the courage are more ready at hand.
Well, I would imagine it feels a little bit like being a referee when it has to do with the family and having you blow a whistle when the family starts to take over and kind of teach or encourage people to say no to the family. I need you to do this, but not that. Or I don't need to be treated like some fragile China doll that's going to break if you touch it.
Yeah, and that's actually not been a real dominant kind of issue for people. And once people kind of learn to when they get their voice, they're able to kind of talk with the family members. So I end up more kind of coaching them about what they want and need, and then they can talk to their family member.
I see.
But I do think a lot of the educating of the family members comes mostly from having seen the Insight team, and working with them, 2 or 3 times.
Oh, I see. So
yeah.
So it's kind of like from, if the person presents the issue to you, say, I really am being driven crazy by XYZ. That's part of the topic of the conversation that you would have with the person in working out a plan, if you will, to, as you say, be more assertive or to set up some boundaries, which of course is, sighted families have boundary issues and assertiveness issues, but it's a different, when the person feels less than, they have to deal with that feeling and acknowledge that, no, they're not less than. They're just the same as they were before. But that's real hard to convince somebody. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Everybody's adjusting, but you're right. It is encouraging the person who's had vision loss to they're kind of adapting to their own situation and feelings about it, and once supporting them in that, and then supporting them and communicating with others and educating them and telling them what they need and don't need. Exactly. Yeah. One other thing I really like to I end up focusing on people about too is like the stress management, because you can be anxious, obviously, like you're not doing things like you used to. You're wondering if you can do them, or just like trying to master several new skills at once, and it can be frustrating. So, I have a yoga background and a bit of mindfulness meditation, and I just like to help people feel a little more solid, like with some deep breathing and some ways to kind of calm down. If they're, needing to do a task, or if they're having a particular like anxiety hitting them around a particular issue or something like that. So, getting in touch with the body and how you can find a better sense of groundedness and solidity with a little deep breathing and sitting nice and tall and in a solid posture, and just being able to diffuse some of that intense anxiety here and there.
Yes.
That's be important as well. and think and tune into your other senses. If you can calm down and, access some of your other ways of experiencing the world, it can be helpful too, obviously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think to me that's real important to help people get some skills in helping calm themselves down instead of looking for somebody else to do it.
Yeah, or getting so upset that you just feel like, oh, I can't master this and I can't handle this.
Right. Mm-hmm.
You can just finding your resilience, finding some calm and clarity. Yeah.
Well, hello, everybody. Jonathan Price here, your podcast producer at AINC, and I wanted to thank you for listening to part 1 of our episode with Lynda McCullough, and a very interesting conversation around coaching and adapting to a new situation that you may find yourself in. So I hope you really enjoyed this episode. Stay tuned to part 2 next week as Bill and Lynda both dive more into adjusting to life and what that means. And if you have any questions, you can contact Insight Skill Center. You can get a hold of Lynda or somebody at the facility. That would be awesome. If you have any questions, please visit us at aincolorado.org. We'd love to hear from you. Love to answer your questions, as we're going to get some of those questions coming up in a couple weeks. So have a great day. Come see us at the hike August 12th. We'll talk to you later.